Hello everyone, and welcome once again at another episode at the Cusp of Freedom, where we'll be talking about why and how we become who we are, and we'll be shining some perspective or philosophy that we implement in our lives so that you can take it with you and implement in yours. And yeah, today I have a very special friend of mine. I'll let him introduce himself in a second, and we'll be discussing why and how he became or got into the tech field. For those of you who want to become future software engineers, stay tuned.
All right, my name's Hayden Friedman, and yeah, we're here in Medellin, Colombia, and I'm originally from the East Coast of the United States. Not sure what else to say, but I guess we'll just go on with questions and we'll get it all out.
Yeah. So Hayden, what do you do for a living, and are you a digital nomad?
I would say yes, I am a digital nomad. I think that that term in itself could be problematic in the sense that it does kind of glorify the activity in some ways.
Okay.
Sometimes I joking just say I'm a Wi-Fi addict.
Okay.
Because that's more how I feel, in some ways.
Okay.
But yeah, I'm a software engineer right now. I'm doing a PhD in software engineering.
Okay.
So I'm entering my third year in that. It's mostly research position, and I also do a little bit of contracting work on the side.
Oh,
so.
Nice. So, are you doing like what specialization are you doing? Are you going into like AI or?
AI is a little bit tangential to what I do, so I'm focusing more on knowledge graphs actually,
Okay.
and their potential to integrate data that could be useful to humanity.
Okay.
Specifically, looking at environmental data about ways we can make the planet more sustainable.
Okay.
There's a lot of open source data, accessible from sensors, from groups that have decided to publish this stuff, but a lot of it isn't integrated. And so I think it's integrating data is 90% of data, and so I think
by integration, do you mean like how, in what sense, like IoT or?
It could have IoT components. I mean, I think that's more of like maybe a streaming thing. I'm talking more about sort of these open source repositories of data that anyone can go to, anyone can find it online.
Okay.
But putting those together and making something greater is something that takes a lot of effort.
Yeah.
Because they're all using different schemas, they're all using different ways of managing the data. And so my kind of annoying project is to go through sort of all of these repositories and start trying to figure out how these can be integrated and we can gain more insights out of sort of combining the power of these individual data repositories. And then eventually doing some kind of artificial intelligence, machine learning, probabilistic reasoning type stuff over that would be the end goal for sure.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So do you think being a big part of being a software engineer is dealing or maintaining or understanding data?
Definitely. I mean, I think a huge percentage of it is just cleaning up your data and getting it into a form that you can actually process. And that's the kind of stuff they don't really teach you in class. If you're in a computer science class, they're going to teach you based off of toy data sets that are like already perfect most of the time. That's just not really a realistic scenario. When the real world data is messy, there's missing data, there's mistakes in the data. And so it's crucially important, and I think it's annoying, but it has to be done. There's no other way.
Well, before we dive into how you end up giving your data, what triggered you to become a software engineer? Like, what age were you when you realized I want to do software engineering? And did you have any like reason behind it? Like, did you know that you could become a digital nomad by being a software engineer? Like, did you know the benefits would be, inspiring? I don't know.
That's a good question. It didn't really cross my mind at the time. And I think I started a little bit late. I started coding when I was like 19 or 20
That's not
so
late.
I was already a couple years into college. So,
Yeah.
Well, I mean, a lot, there's kids out there who start at 5 years old and they're already hacking into stuff at 7. But I started a little bit later, and I think I was going in a different direction. I picked it up on a whim and I loved it. I didn't really have the sort of thought that I could ever work remotely. I figured I'd be going into an office, and I was for the first 3 years.
Okay.
And right before the pandemic, I actually asked my boss to go to San Diego, so I went and worked from San Diego for about 4 months.
Okay.
And then I traveled around California, working for a couple more months, and then the pandemic happened. So, and then everyone was online. So I beat the pandemic by about 6 months, but soon everyone else was doing it too. So
Nice.
yeah, and yeah, I never really have gone back to an office after that point.
What path were you on before moving to software engineering, and what I don't know, did you like what made your beliefs be, what made you so confident that you could just go into computer science and come out successful? And what path were you on before you even decided to switch?
Yeah, so I was actually on a media production path,
Okay.
Which you might relate to, considering you also are a software engineer and you produce media. So I was actually going into documentary filmmaking. I had done a couple internships, and I thought maybe that would be the way to go. I had a bit of a change of heart, and I ended up having a minor in computer science out of university, and I figured no one's going to hire me with a minor. Next thing I know, Google's sending me recruiting messages on LinkedIn, and I'm like, hold on, you guys know I didn't major in this, right? But they send messages out to a lot of people, but that actually did give me the confidence. I interviewed with them, I didn't get the job with them, but that did give me the confidence to be like, if Google wants to interview me, I can probably get a job somewhere,
Yeah. Interesting. So when you did switch and you started working, I guess how long did it take you before you got a job? What were some challenges that you went through? Like, how did it feel going through, because you said having a minor wasn't enough, so you probably took on the full major, right? As a computer science?
No, I just had the minor.
Okay.
Yeah.
So was it challenging at all? And what was the most challenging part of being a successful software engineer or getting that position as a software engineer? What would you say was the most challenging part before you got a job?
Yeah, I think it took me about 3 months. So it wasn't too bad of a job search. I was actually, in the meantime, delivering sandwiches for Jimmy John's.
Okay.
And that was very challenging. I was I was on my bike, riding around Philadelphia, Center City, Philadelphia, a lot of traffic, a lot of cars, carrying really unwieldy. Sometimes they have these catering platters you have to bring on your bike, and you look at these things and you're like, how am I going to bring this thing on my bike?
You figure it out.
You just figure it out. There's no right answer. You just do it. And so doing that, job searching on the side. Fortunately, I found a job fairly quickly. But I think it kind of gave me that experience. Like, wow, there's a lot of jobs out there that are tough. They don't pay a lot in that kind of position. So and there were people there who were working there for years, and just kind of like gave me a little bit of perspective for sure.
So this is like after college, right? And you're looking for a job. Did you have like any internship on your resume regarding software development stuff, or were you just like
No, I didn't. Yeah, I had only internships in film production, and I was basically winging it. It turns out there's enough of a demand for this field that it wasn't really a problem. Like, I actually got 3 job offers.
Interesting.
And I had my pick, so yeah, it was not really an issue.
And you went through like the technical interview type of deal?
Yep, I had technical interviews. I don't think they were as challenging as they can be. Sometimes they're very, very challenging, and I think I had some maybe slightly more easy questions, but they were looking for basically anyone because they had a position to fill, and I ended up taking a job at University of Pennsylvania in the Department of Bioinformatics.
Nice.
That was a cool experience to work in sort of the research space as well, and it kind of led me into going into the PhD as well. So
interesting.
Yeah.
So you went into PhD. Do you think student loans was an issue? Because I know a lot of people don't like going into like a PhD program if like the student loans is too high. So how is going for a PhD been beneficial, and how has it not been beneficial, especially as a software engineer, given that there's such a high demand for the jobs?
Yeah, I think on the sort of perspective of student loans, personally, it wasn't something that affected me. I want to say, like, I feel like I've been pretty privileged in life in general, and I think that's not a point that I want to miss in this interview. Like, I think growing up with parents who encouraged my education, who had money to support me, going to a good school, good university, these things are really important, and not everyone has the opportunities that I had, and I'm always very conscious of that. From a perspective of student loans, I actually went to college for free, so it wasn't an issue for me.
Your scholarship free, or?
It was my father was like faculty at the university, and so it was one of the benefits. Yeah.
Wow.
So I
wow, nice.
Yeah, I was kind of lucked out on that one for sure. With that said, student loans are a huge problem in the States. I think there was recently some legislation passed to relieve $10,000 in student loans, and 20 for you, yeah. All right. I mean, I think that's a great step in the right direction.
Yeah.
I think education should be more accessible for everyone. If we want to reduce the inequalities that we have, this is a good step forward, and I think we should do more.
I mean, not to get into politics, but don't you think the next president can just be like, forgive 20 more thousand, you win votes?
Yeah, I mean that's an interesting question. I think it's a generally popular thing to do, and I would be in support of it. I think there's even though it personally wouldn't help me, some people have the mentality of like, they should pay what they owe or whatever. I mean, I think you have to look at the price of higher education in the U.S. and you realize like it's just so outrageously expensive that people are working themselves into debt that they're going to be paying off their whole lives.
Yeah.
And it's, for me, like I would definitely support, the next president or the current president doing that kind of legislation. For sure. Yeah.
That's true.
For sure. Yeah.
But don't you think a big part of our problems isn't the fact that, we have a lot of student loans? For me, I think it's more of like we lack financial education.
Definitely.
Because for me, like, for example, after college, like I went to college, I kind of breezed through college because, I don't know, computer engineering wasn't that hard. But like I didn't even like realize that how important personal finance would be until after college, and then I realized, wow, if I had only known this before college, I would have like started to fix my credit, would have known, how to take advantage of like the Roth IRA earlier, stuff like that. So yeah,
definitely. I mean, I think asking kids at age 18 to make this kind of decision about their life is kind of it's ludicrous. Like when you're 18, you have no sense of financial responsibility. At least I certainly didn't. I think your parents play a big part of that, and it depends how you're raised. I think if your parents are financially responsible, you're likely to be financially responsible.
Yeah.
If your parents aren't, you have no role models in that, and you have to figure it out yourself. And people, they dig themselves into holes sometimes with that. But I think the education system in the U.S. is another topic, but I think the public education system, it's really unequal. Like there's schools that are really good and there's schools that are terrible, and it really just depends where you grow up, like what socioeconomic sort of level you're at, environment you're at, and it's not fair, but it's the way it is right now. So
interesting. So what would you say to someone that didn't exactly grow up in a social economical environment that benefited their education or their well-being? What would you say to them if they want to become like software engineers, but their socioeconomical status is like? So put yourself in their perspective for a second, right? They have to worry about what they're gonna eat. Like where would you say they should get started? I guess.
I mean, it's a tough call for me. I do want to go back to the fact that like I grew up with a lot of privilege. Like I think that's more of a factor than your intelligence. I do. I think that there are more unintelligent, privileged people with good jobs than like intelligent people who grew up in underprivileged areas.
True.
That is the biggest factor. And so, you're born into a certain class, and that's just kind of how it goes, and we have to be conscious of that. With that said, there's of course people who do start at a sort of lower socioeconomic tier and are able to make it up.
Yeah.
I think they do that with a lot of self-motivation, a lot of personal drive and perseverance, and being able to overcome obstacles that other people do not have to deal with, and so there are certainly people who can do it. It's definitely possible, but the odds are just more stacked against people, people in that situation.
I see what you mean.
Yeah.
So like there's hope. All hope isn't lost if you have what it takes, and if you don't have what it takes, then it's okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you don't have what it takes, but you grow up white, male, and affluent, then maybe it doesn't matter. And that's like the reality of life in the U.S., I think, and I think that is something that we need to work on as a society. I think we're moving in the right direction slowly, but there's still like a lot of work to be done in that regard, and in the meantime there's a lot of people who aren't getting the same kind of equal opportunities.
What do you think about like what do you think is the importance of? Okay, I guess let me take a step back, right? What's been your perspective or sort of like philosophy that you've lived by that's helped you overcome whatever obstacles? I know you said you grew up from a privileged background, but I'm sure we all have our own adversities. So what is like your perspective or your philosophy when you face hard times?
Definitely. I mean, I take a lot of inspiration from my parents. I think both of my parents are really smart people who valued, doing a good job in raising me. And I think about the challenges they went through in order to provide for me and my sister. in, make sure that, we were doing our homework every day, we were getting exercise, we were eating right, we were doing the stuff that we should have been doing, and I take a lot of inspiration. They've also both overcome a lot of challenges in their respective careers.
Yeah.
And, I just think, like, what would they do in this situation, and what would they, want me to do if I'm going through something that's a little bit harder, and be able to sort of think about that. And I give all the credit to them, the way that they raised myself and my younger sister. I think they're really good parents, and they did a good job.
That's very kind of you. Do you think that a lot of us that go through these, adversity or very, very challenging moments, you think we go through them because our parents did do a really good job educating us in a certain way? Like, do you think a lot of our trauma or challenges that we face stem from our parents?
Yeah, I think it's really important, how you're raised. And I think it's also sort of, there's cultural differences in how people raise their kids, and that also is a big factor. But yes, definitely. I mean, I think it's like maybe the number one most important factor in how people, become who they are is who their parents are. And you can even look at it from a political perspective. Like, almost everybody who was raised in a certain political sphere, be it conservative or liberal, becomes that same, falls into that same camp as well. And I think, you can look at that with politics, with religion, maybe you've been with like something like sports teams.
But there seems to always be like, there's very few percentage of people that are able to like think outside the box or think outside the norm.
Definitely, yeah. I've heard, some other podcasts about people who were raised in like rural Idaho or something, and super conservative Christian environment where they weren't really encouraged to think outside the box or be themselves. They were encouraged to fit in. And, some of them, certain people do get out. They move to New York City, they move to San Francisco, they live in with other young people who are liberal and have progressive ideas. And a lot of them say when they go back to their towns, they feel a little strange, because they have this new, different way of thinking. Different perspective, and maybe not even that's very welcome in that place where they grew up,
Interesting.
Yeah.
So going out of the norm and seeking that perspective, or seeking to challenge yourself to grow, how important do you think that is for like self-development?
I mean, it's the most important thing, of course, just like pushing yourself to be better, I think. No matter where you are, no matter where you start, you can always improve on who you are, right?
No limit.
There might be some limit, but I think you can always improve from where you were before. And I think a friend of mine told me in college that never compare yourself to other people.
Yeah.
Because you're always going to find people who you think are doing better than you.
Yeah.
Better looking people, smarter people, more successful people. You can do that all day, He said compare yourself to who you were before, and
that's exactly right.
Yeah, and if you're happy with that, if you're happy that you're a better person than you were a year ago, 6 months ago, you're going in the right direction, and that's how you should be thinking about it. Improve yourself every day, and things will fall into place from there, I think.
So you would say that, like, I guess a big problem that we face today is that people compare themselves to other people a lot, and they don't really focus on themselves. I mean, social media is out right now, so I feel like a lot of people miss the conversation or miss the opportunity to connect with others because they always like social media. And I think one of the biggest driven factors on social media is the endless scroll to, compare yourself to this, that, people's best experiences. I don't know. What would you say how would you say people should use social media? Like, should they just be creating content? Should they just get off and focus on themselves altogether, or?
Yeah, I think we need to kind of, I don't use it much, to be honest, but I think I logged onto Instagram for the first time just to message you today in a few weeks. So.
And you lived without social media?
Yeah, I don't do it much, it's not really my thing. I know some people love it, and I can see why, it kind of pulls you in a little bit. Yeah, I mean, I think we need to learn like how to have a good balance as a society with that, because I think there is a lot of good that come out of it. It gets a lot of coverage for the negative effects, but there's also great things that can happen from social media. You can make connections across countries with people. There have been, protests against brutal dictators that have gained tons of support on social media and been able to be successful because of that. So there are positives that can come out of it. So we need to figure out how to balance that with the the fact that these are like for-profit companies that profit off of us spending time on the platform. And our brains just aren't really adapted for this. like this technological spurt has happened, within the last 20 years, really fast, and our brains evolve over hundreds of thousands of years, and so introducing this now, for our sort of kind of prehistoric brains is a little bit tough, and so we're still learning how to figure that out. I do think that it's overall we are going to get a good balance, and I think we're working towards that. There's people who are thinking about it, and I think that we're still very early on in this social media age. We barely even hit like 15 years, I would say, since it's really taken off. So there's a lot of room for it to grow and to be a positive influence, I think.
That's probably true. So in your software development, do you do like front end, back end, full stack?
Mostly back end, yeah.
What would you say for someone that doesn't know whether to go front end, back end? I don't know. Can you describe like what a front end developer does, what a back end developer does?
I mean, it's front end is sort of more like the design aspect, and you're going to have client work making websites, and I think a lot of people are attracted to that. Personally, I never really have had any experience working with JavaScript. It just hasn't really been my cup of tea. I've always been doing sort of more data science stuff using Java, Python, application development, stuff like that. And they're really different fields. I mean, you're coding in both, but as you know, I mean, it's a really different skill set. And my first boss would refer to JavaScript like as the Wild West. He hated it. He was like, I'm never touching JavaScript, never doing front end, like not my thing, And there's other people who only do JavaScript, and that's their life. So I think it's just like for me, it was kind of just coincidence, like where I the department that I was in university was definitely not really going to do a good job of training you to be a front-end engineer, but it did a pretty good job of training me to be a back-end engineer. And so I'd say I'm more just like a product of circumstance for the most part. Nice.
Yep. Do you plan on like sticking around in the development aspect of it, or would you want to like go, distinguished engineer or product management side?
I definitely like the development. I like having my hands on the code, and it's very fun to sit down, spend a few hours just writing code.
You don't get burnt out.
Yeah, I do, but I do a lot of other stuff too, just not writing code. I like the research aspect, because you're not just coding. You're doing some coding, and you're reading papers, you're writing papers, you're having discourse with other researchers, you're sharing ideas. Some days I spend a whole day just thinking. I don't do anything. I just think about it, and write down, talk to people, and that's kind of accepted in the research field, I think, because you have to generate ideas that are novel and are well thought out. So if I tell people, what did you do today, and I'd say I just sat down and thought. Sat on the couch, and sometimes if you work for a company, they might not be too happy with that.
I was just sitting down smoking weed, thinking of what I did.
well, the weed maybe is after, but
Anyways, so you would say that applied research in computer science is a lot more chill with regards to like being able to think ideas up instead of always being like burnt out coding?
I mean, I think you can definitely get burned out too. You can get burned out doing anything. I think there's more variety in research in the stuff you're doing. Like when you're working, sometimes if you're a software engineer, you're doing the same thing every day. You're just taking tickets, you're looking at the ticket, and you're fixing the bug or whatever the ticket is requesting. You're adding the feature, making the requests. And those can be different too. I mean, you can be learning and doing interesting stuff in that framework as well, and some people love that kind of thing. I like personally being able to sort of have that idea of like that I'm sort of innovating or doing something that no one's done before, even if it's a minor contribution, and realistically most research contributions are incremental. They're not groundbreaking. They're taking something someone else has done one step further, where they're laying the groundwork for someone else to take it one step further. So even being a part of that, I feel good. I feel like I'm part of a community of thinkers and people who are working,
with the same values as you.
Yeah, sometimes with the same values, and it's sometimes not, I think, but
Let's think for a second that like to become a software engineer, there's multiple ways to become, right?
For sure.
Yeah. And depending on where you are in the world, you have different socioeconomical environments, but I think for the most part, everyone has access to the multiple ways in which you can become a software engineer, right? Because I think there's only 2 ways. Maybe more, but the ways that I can think of is if you go to college or if you do like a boot camp, right? So would you say one is more beneficial than the other, or do you think that if you're smart enough to get into college, then you're smart enough to be a software engineer?
I mean, I guess first I should say, like, I think not everyone would have that opportunity to do either of those things, you know? But I guess, you know, thinking about in terms of comparing, I mean, I think I haven't done a boot camp personally, so I've heard that they can be really good. But I think they can be much more practical. Yeah. College tends to be a bit more theoretical. Yeah. I don't want to say that, you know, I didn't learn anything in college. I think I wouldn't be where I am today if I didn't take those classes, you know, that I took in university. Sure. But, you know, sometimes I also know people who, you know, have just gotten a job with a boot camp. So I think if you have the mental capacity and the skill set, like, you'll be able to pick it up, you know. You can even teach yourself. I don't see anything wrong with just teaching yourself.
Do you think there's a critical skill that one must have in order to go into, like, learning or teaching themselves how to code? Yeah,
patience and perseverance, I would say. Patience, perseverance. I think almost anyone can do it. I don't think it requires a ton of brain power, honestly. I think that anybody can learn it. It's really just like, how willing are you to sit down for an hour and debug line by line your code and figure out what's not working?
And use Google.
And use Google, yeah. Again, I mean, there's so much that comes from having a good education as you know, when you're growing up. And I think even being able to do something as simple as use Google to, like, evaluate a problem or figure this out is something that not everyone grows up being able to do, you know.
Wow, I didn't even think of that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I worked with someone for a quarter on a debate project, actually, research debate project in university my first year. This was a guy from inner city Manhattan. Like, he grew up, you know, in the city, didn't go to a great public school. And I remember sitting down and saying, all right, let's go ahead and Google, you know, and just, like, search around. And he didn't really know what to do. Like, he didn't know what keywords to use to get what he was looking for.
Wow.
And that's a huge barrier if you can't do that. And that's something that I learned because I went to a good public school, and they actually taught us how to, like, do that kind of research and use the internet to retrieve what you wanted. So there's so many little things that you might not normally think of that will help people who do have that good education. And again, that is why, like, to me, one of the most important things the United States needs to work on is making public education equal for everyone across the board, you know?
Well, yeah, that's true. But I think, like, for Americans, I feel like it's an individual responsibility for you to. I know this might come from, like, I guess, a privileged mindset, but I've been in the gutter, in the struggle. And I realized, like, it just matters how I think it really just matters how curious somebody is, right? If you're always curious to learn, you'll figure things out, like, every day. But if you're not very curious and you're just, like, always stagnant waiting for shit to happen, then you're pretty much.
Do you think? Let me ask you a question. Do you think your parents, like, encourage that kind of curiosity and that kind of exploration? Not too much. That was all you.
Yeah.
That was all you.
Yeah, that was pretty much all me.
That's cool. Yeah.
So the way I grew up is basically, like, when I was 4, I remember. So, well, I'm not gonna say that part of the story because it's kind of sad. But when I was 4, I moved to the U.S. and my mom always had to work, so I always stayed home by myself, right? But then, because I had this other experience, like, prior to 4 in Cameroon, I realized that, like, you know, life for people were very different in the United States. So that kind of triggered my curiosity a lot, right? So growing up from 4 to 11, I'm always, like, very curious. And then when I went back to Cameroon for 7 years, I became even more curious and willing to, like, develop. And I think that's kind of why, you know, I didn't really get into much student loans or struggle too much. But.
Gotcha. Yeah, definitely. I mean, it sounds like you had that, like, innate curiosity and you were just wanted to, like, push yourself forwards and learn something every day. So,
challenge myself.
Yeah.
So what do you think someone can do in their lives if they, because, man, I mean, we're talking about, like, inspiring people to be like you, right? And inspiring people to take the time to self-develop and take the time to learn what's necessary for them to be in a position where they can have the freedom to do what it is they love to do in life, right? But what would you tell someone that has a hard time imagining the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, or a hard time imagining, like, the fruits of their labor, right? Like, what would you tell them for them to wake up every day, or to be present in every moment that they have to work towards something that's gonna, like,
Definitely. I mean, I think like, my experience is, everyone's experience is different, right?
Yeah.
And so you have to figure out what works for you on a daily basis. But I think one of the best things you can do to invest in your future is not sacrifice your future for the present. And I think a lot of people sort of go for some sort of short-term hedonistic impulses and, end up setting themselves back. They'll go out and maybe if you gamble, if you go out and spend a lot of money drinking, fancy restaurants, like there's a lot of ways you can spend all of your money in this society, because that's what the society tells you to do, is like go out and spend what you earn instead of saving your money. And realistically, or investing, and realistically, you don't need to really spend a lot of money to live. You can cook your meals, you can get exercise outside, you can do almost everything you really need to do without paying too much, or paying for these sort of extra things. I would say in a lot of cases you don't even need to own a car. It depends where you live. Sometimes you do, but if you can avoid it, it's better, it saves you a lot of money. So not only to focus on the financial perspective, but I do think living paycheck to paycheck is something a lot of people do. And if they can break out of that cycle and find a way to save more than they're spending, and not just break even, but put money away every paycheck, that's going to go a long way towards advancing people. And you have to think about your expenses and why you're spending on certain things, if you really need to spend on certain things, and what is really important to you. Because, for me, most of the satisfaction I get in life is out of things that are free. So I think if that's a good way to be.
The best things in life are free.
Yeah, I think that's true. Honestly, I do. I really believe that. So
do you think that like for people that have a hard time putting themselves in the mindset of abundance, right? And like you said, you might need to reevaluate the way you spend your money. But to me, I feel like it's more of reevaluating how you prioritize your time, or what you use your time doing. I think more people need to just take the time to learn the skill that allows them to make more money, to meet that economical threshold. Like just taking the time to develop a skill that you think you might not like, but you're pretty good at, I think is very important. And I think people struggle taking that time, whether it's 1 month, 3 months, 6 months. I think people struggle taking that time to self-develop for one reason or another.
Definitely.
I think a lot of people have like a to-do list, maybe 15 things, but they never get to it.
Yeah.
But maybe everything on that list might take them like 5 minutes or 10 minutes to start and finish.
Sure. Yeah, just getting started is a huge first step, but sticking with something is the next step for sure. With that said, that can be really hard. I mean, if you're working, really long hours,
it can be discouraging.
And you're getting home late at night and you have to go back early morning to work again, you might not have a lot of time to be putting into like doing a coding bootcamp or something like that, and I think people who do that, like, all the power to you, like, you're awesome, you're crushing it, if you can do that. But we also need time to like relax our brains a little bit, and I think there's a lot of work out there that's kind of mind-numbing, if you're out there like flipping burgers, I guess is the stereotypical example. It might be kind of hard to feel energized at the end of like a 8-10 hour shift to come home, so I think everyone should do the best they can, but at the same time we got to take care of our mental health too. So
to me, I feel like mental health is a big thing, but also like getting out of that environment where you're working a dead-end job. I think it takes a lot of courage for you to just say like, forget this. I'm gonna take some time off to develop a certain skill that'll allow me to get a better job, and maybe a year later I'll be in a better place than still being at the same place flipping burgers. I think people have a hard time envisioning themselves going through the process of like losing their dead-end job, developing themselves. I don't know, is it like discouraging for them to believe in themselves that they can't do it? Like, what is holding people back from like?
It's a risk too, right? To quit your job, it's a big risk.
I mean, is it really? Is it really like? Isn't there like endless job for flipping?
Yeah, I guess in the States maybe you could just get another one, but I think again, if you're living paycheck to paycheck and you quit your job, all of a sudden you're underwater. So if you're in that situation, it's going to be harder, and I wouldn't recommend people just quit their job. If you have a little bit of buffer room, then go for it. If you have some savings, you think you can coast for a few months, a year, live cheap and not work and develop other skills.
Or live
absolutely.
Or live with your parents.
Or live with your parents. Yeah. Nothing wrong with it. If you're using it to advance yourself, for sure. Totally agree with that. Yeah. If your parents are on board, hopefully they if they're on the same page, and yeah, absolutely. Not everyone has parents who might be able to support them in that way. Maybe you and I might be fortunate enough to have that. So.
That's true. That's very true. Yeah. So we've spoken a little bit about why and how you became a software engineer. Let's talk a little bit about being a digital nomad. You've been traveling for what, 3 years?
Let's see. I guess I started as a digital nomad, quote unquote, in 2019. Okay. 2019. So yeah, about 3 years now. That was a lot of that sort of happened because of the pandemic as well.
Was it your first time traveling, or?
No, I was fortunate enough to sort of had traveled as a kid. My family really prioritized traveling, so nice. and I did a few trips in college, like extensive trips over the summers as well.
Nice.
And so I it was something I knew I loved to do.
Were your trips international or just like national?
Yeah, so my junior year summer, when I was a rising senior, I went to Kenya for 4 months, and I worked with a nonprofit there.
Nice.
And then I went to the Middle East the following summer for about 3 months.
Wow, what an experience!
Yeah, really different experiences.
Okay, so how did that shape your perspective of the world? Like when you came back to the U.S., were you like, what the fuck? Like, I don't know, like.
Yeah, it was absolutely eye-opening. I had never really seen life outside of New York State. I mean, I'd traveled a little bit in the U.S., but maybe Pennsylvania, not too far. And yeah, like just arriving in Kenya and seeing life in Nairobi, there's so many things that are so different and eye-opening about that experience. The level of poverty is one thing that definitely stands out, and we have poverty in the States, but it's nothing like, what is in other places. And the way people live and the way they interact and everything, just understanding that people go through different modes, and people don't have to all be like Northeast Americans, and just like having that experience was absolutely. I attribute a lot of my development to doing that traveling. Yeah.
Well, do you think that most people, I don't know, travel when they're younger, they'll gain like the perspective to be more independent and to challenge themselves? Would you say that comes along with traveling? And
absolutely, yeah. I would say that traveling is something that can open eyes if you do it in the respectful, appropriate way. There's also a way to travel in the incorrect way, in my opinion, which is sort of trampling over the local culture and expecting everyone to sort of treat you like a king because you're, you have a lot of money. But no, I think like doing exchanges and programs like that is really beneficial. The U.S., I would be in support of the U.S. having an exchange program where kids in public school go to spend time in another part of the country or even another part of the U.S. Imagine like how our country's divides could be healed if everyone growing up who lived in a city went to live in a rural area, and everyone who lived in a rural area went to live in a city for like 6 months to a year.
That's true.
You would meet people who are different than you. You would talk about things, and you would gain a perspective. And I really think that would be something that'd be very beneficial for almost everyone.
And that perspective is very powerful because do you feel like perspective helps guide the decision making people make in life? Like depending on how you perceive the world guides how you behave on a regular basis.
Of course, yeah. I mean, and having that traveling experience, I wouldn't say necessarily that you just understand people better, but I don't think that's fair to say, but I think you would understand that people can be different than you. Yeah. And that's a sort of meta thought that, or that people's experiences can be different than you. There's actually a philosophical term for that. I forget exactly what it is, but it basically is this idea that like, people's mental states are not the same as yours, right? Yeah. This is an important like recognition to have, and it can help justify and explain why people are behaving in certain ways that you might not understand. And so, yeah, absolutely. There's really no downside I see to it as long as you have the right mentality when you're traveling.
What are some downsides to traveling or being a digital nomad? First of all, do you think the pros outweighs the cons? And do you think that the cons get bigger the longer you travel?
Let's see. Are you talking from a personal perspective or from like a global perspective personal perspective? I mean, I would say that I think we're experiencing like a revolution based on the COVID pandemic, basically, because people now have the opportunity to do this at a scale that never before happened, right? Like, before people were doing it, but they were like few and far between. Now, so many more jobs are remote. This is something that the world is going to have to deal with. It's actually a global thing. Yeah, you could say it's an issue, because you have these people coming from wealthy countries and realizing, I can work my job from Colombia or, you know, any of a handful of countries that will let me in on a very generous tourist visa, no questions asked. And I'm going to be very wealthy there. Like, I'll be able to do whatever I want. And that, you could really view it as an issue, because it is like something that is going to have a big impact on whatever local culture is, you know, having these people come in. So
that's true. That's very true.
I do think, like, everyone who travels should try to be conscious of that and realize that you're going to have a lot of privilege just by being there and being who you are, having the money that you have and looking the way that you do. Well, some people blend in better than others. I don't blend in much here. People shout "Hey gringo" to me a lot in the streets, and, you know, I laugh. But at the same time, I even feel like people treat me with some level of very undeserved respect here, being an American. You know, there's this sort of like ideal of being an American, and a lot of people here want to come to the States, and they think it's very cool to meet an American sometimes.
Well, and then
they think I have a lot of money, and relatively we do, you know, we do have a lot of money. And so, and that's not like anything I've done. I haven't done anything to deserve that respect. It's just I happen to be from that country, and so these are the dynamics at play that everyone really should be thinking about who's doing this, I think, you know. Traveling, you know, if you come to Colombia because you want to get cheap drinks and, you know, like, get with prostitutes and do all this kind of stuff, like, that's really the wrong reason to come, and it's going to have a big negative impact on, because now you have this industry that's basically feeding that demand, you know, that the demand for drugs, the demand for sex, the demand for alcohol, like, that industry springs up in the country because of the extranjeros that are coming, and so we're actually bringing this industry up in the country with the money that we're bringing in and spending in that way. So
you get what you look for.
Yeah, you get it, but you're not even necessarily feeling the damages, because you might just be passing through.
True.
You know, you might just be coming through to a place for 2 weeks, working in a cafe, and you know, spending your money in these ways, and then moving on. And then whatever damage that phenomenon is doing to the local community, you don't even have to feel it. And you know, even
that's
if
so true.
So it's something I think just to be conscious of, for sure, when you travel.
Wow. Okay, so what is your take on, like, what we can do in our individual lives, or what do you do in your individual life to be a percentage better the next day?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think one of the things is, like, exercise, actually. Exercising, I feel like, is good for your body, it's good for your mind. Just, like, do it every day. Like, it's going to be awesome. Eating healthy is really, really good for your mind, too. It's good for your body. Like, getting into, like, regular routines of that, I think, is what you need to, like, sustain yourself for the long run, you know? And then sort of, I think having positive social interactions is also really important every day. Like, going out of your way to talk to someone on the street, or, you know, striking up a conversation with someone at a coffee shop. Like, those interactions really can help enrich your life, you know? That's another thing. And I would also say just reading and, you know, staying up to date with what's going on in the world. You know? Those are, I think for me, those are things that all enrich my life personally and help me be a better person.
And it helps you, I guess it can get a little lonely if you're traveling as a digital nomad by yourself. So I guess, like, having those social interactions can also be very beneficial, in addition to, like, the exercise and whatnot.
Yeah, definitely. But yeah, I think, you know, anytime you're traveling, like, people are usually curious to meet you, you know, because you do have a different perspective. And I think if you treat that perspective positively, you can actually share that perspective and learn from other people's perspectives as well, and have sort of an exchange. And, you know, I think that's a way that this phenomenon could actually end up being a very good thing, which is that people end up sort of understanding each other a little bit more. As it is, I don't really see that happening for the most part. I think there are instances of that happening, but I think the the way things have happened, at least here in Colombia, is more that there's now sort of an industry tailored to serving the wealthy Europeans and Americans that come, and those people tend to more interact with themselves than with the locals. And when they do interact with the locals, it's in a sense of like a service. It's like the locals are serving them, and that's the sense of the interaction. And so breaking down that barrier when you're traveling and being able to find genuine connections with people who live in the area that you're traveling in,
that's very good.
And willing to have that exchange, not in the capacity of like ordering, you know, at a restaurant or something, or you know, that's really important to me. That's something I really try to do a lot.
That's what I think that's also where more perspective comes from, because you actually feel what the locals are feeling rather than just like being there for whatever other reason.
Absolutely, yeah.
I get that.
Yeah.
So I don't know, just for the sake of keeping this episode concise, do you have any last word of advice you want to give anyone watching this and trying to be better than you or like you?
I mean, I would say that I, you know, don't really consider myself too much of a role model. I think I'm still figuring myself out a lot as well. You know, every day I introspect and I just try to think about what I can do, you know, to sort of learn more and be a better person. But it's still a journey. You know, every day it's, you know, still trying to get better. And I think just like, like being able to be introspective, being able to like meditate, self-reflect, be empathetic, figuring out who you are.
Is that something you do? You meditate?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
You mentioned that you like exercise.
Well, it's all sort of meditation.
Okay,
I mean, I mean, the amounts of times that I actually sit down and practice, like, you know, just a breathing meditation, you know, I might do that once a week, but I also feel like I meditate when I exercise, I meditate when I cook. Like, there's sort of these, like, sort of process-based things that are also sort of a self-reflection opportunity. But, yeah, no, I think, like, figuring out how you fit into the community that you're a part of is one of the most important things to me.
Oh, wow.
And I would recommend, you know, just people thinking about that and figuring out how they can try to maybe even improve the community or just be a part of it. And because we do live in a somewhat isolated world these days, you know, it can be very easily isolated due to, you know, a lot of the technological factors as well. And I think in the States especially, we have lost a lot of the sense of community.
It's totally gone.
So trying to bring that back, thinking about ways we can re-engage with the people around us, you know, is pretty important, because we're social animals when it comes down to it. So that's really one of the paths to success and happiness, I think, is the connections you have, for sure.
I think you're right. I think we're meant to like develop ourselves and grow, but we're also meant to like, you know, interact with others and be in social environments where we can like contribute and make better. Yeah, absolutely right. But thank you guys for tuning in for about 30-40 minutes. I'm not really sure how long this lasted. And thank you, Hayden, for taking the time.
All right, I think it was long enough
to be on the episode. Really appreciate your perspective and your philosophy.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, sure. Until next time. Thank you guys. Right. Hey, good stuff. Wow, that was a long time.